Hello my guys, gals and non-binary pals, and welcome to a new video essay by Dan Fatales. My name is Alicia, my pronouns are she, them, and in this episode I'd like to discuss with you the reasons to be of the upper class, which in the UK overlaps a lot with actual nobility and aristocracy. We have a queen after all. But before we get started, let me thank our patrons that make it possible for us to even dedicate the time to research and to make these videos, and to ask to those of you who can afford it to maybe consider joining in, as many of the topics that we discuss are not exactly YouTube algorithm friendly, and for the moment our channel is not even monetized, so Patreon and PayPal donations are all we can count on to continue and produce content here. If you can support our work, head on to Patreon and join the revolution. Speaking of revolution, researching for this video, I started to understand why, when France got their ducks in a row during theirs, Great Britain didn't quite follow through, even if, arguably, today's landscape might be mighty different and for the best if we had done so. And yes, I can say we, because regardless of having been born in Italy with an Egyptian parent, I am, as of last year, a British citizen too. Not that in today's climate it matters for much, since we also have a new law that basically allows the Home Office to just strip us of our citizenship without warning. But I digress. This is not about you, pretty. This is about that thin slice of population you and many of your colleagues just love to kiss the sandals of. Because boy, oh boy, is there anything better than not having to work for money, fear and respect? Because that's what the British aristocracy has basically been doing for the last 1,000 years. One thing at a time. So the new season of Bridgerton has just been released. The second film of Downton Abbey is upon us. In all of this, what's with the fascination we have towards peaking at the very upper class, quite literally, when this is the 0.004% of British population? Doesn't give much of an idea of proportion, does it? Put it this way. Considering only hereditary peerages, which is still just a fraction of the British nobility, we have one lord every 83,000 people. These are the people that during their lifetime will never experience the feeling of worry that is derived by lack of financial resources, and with contexts that quite literally allows them to do everything and anything they so desire in this life. And with the guarantee to pass down generations the same reassurance of power and wealth, having their lifestyle quite literally subsidized and enshrined in British law and culture. For comparison, we have a person living under the poverty line every 5 people in the UK, a bit far removed from the high life of one lord for 83,000 people. Am I the only one wondering what would have happened if the wealth of these titles had been confiscated and redistributed for the benefit of the population? If, instead of claiming the royal family is good for tourism, we had every palace, every castle, every peer family seat as a tourist attraction of its own, just like Versailles is, but without the need for nobles inside. But I'm getting ahead of myself. For now, tell me, don't you just love to see the riches and style, learning what the posh class is from the 6th season and now 2 films of Downton Abbey? Oh, if only life could be that, built on the shoulders of the working class. When Downton Abbey first came onto our TV screens, the main comment I heard from everywhere was how anyone would love it. See? It's not about class, it's a soap opera, it's about life. And as every work of fiction, it has the added premium of allowing a writer like Julian Fellowes to not only write the nobility he so aspires to himself, but also the reactions of the characters around them, meaning that without a real context, he can tell you the story of the benevolent lord of the manor who, out of the goodness of his own heart and faithful to his duty, self-sacrifices himself for the benefit of all the people living in the village he owns, guaranteeing everybody's well-being. What a golden heart to send his cook to the Moorfield Eye Hospital to cure her from certain blindness and out of his own pocket. What a generous lord indeed, guaranteeing a job as his valet to the man who fought in the war with him and saved his life. Not without putting up a fight, but ultimately, this noble family even opens up their arms to the hot-headed socialist who corrupts their youngest daughter into marrying down. And we don't quite say it, but really, since Sybil died in childbirth, really, the socialist killed her. But the generous Crawley family still looks past this and allows him to keep around his own daughter and, of course, have him work as a land agent, whom they'd otherwise have to hire and pay. I think to appreciate just how much all the aforementioned is really propaganda, we will need to talk about how lords came to be in Great Britain. But before that, I find it interesting to look closer to the creator of the show, his past, his allegiance, his interests, just to understand the actual context that we would otherwise miss, taking just the reaction of the working class characters from the show as written in by Julian Fellowes himself. Call me crazy, but I think Fellowes wrote himself in the story, but not as the Lord, as the butler, Carson. Multiple times there's the joke of Carson, the man occupying the highest rank downstairs, and the joke is that he is actually more of a snob than the nobles themselves. In the first Downton Abbey film, he's gifted for Christmas by the family a book about European royalty, with the awareness that no one knows and cares about ranks, lineages and form as much as he does. He stands in rank with a bizarre, simultaneous desire to serve the family, those by nature, by blood, by birth better than him, while at the same time exercising all of his power over people beneath him, as if he'd earned that. Earn is such an interesting concept and the key to the cognitive dissonance here. Downstairs, the ranks are earned. You work well, you're humble, you rise in ranks. But only if you keep your head down and recognize the superiority of those above you. Wait, if they're innately superior, what did they earn? No, sorry, don't ask a question. Just keep your head down, and whatever you do, never, ever manifest your awareness that with your experience, your training, you are more of a butler maybe than a valet. No, don't do it. You'll be chewed up and spat out if you dare voice your merits. I'm looking at you, Mosley.
I've given it a lot of thought.
Have you indeed?
First, I've needed to deal with my father's disappointment when he learned of my downward path. But I weighed it against the power to do good that all employment brings.
Did you now? And you thought all that?
I feel I could contain my skills and guide them into a more modest channel without loss of dignity.
Just fancy.
So, all in all, and after mature deliberation, you'll be pleased to hear that I can accept your offer.
What offer?
To replace Alfred as foreman.
Oh, dear Mr. Mosley, I'm afraid that Alfred is not leaving now. It's a pity you didn't accept the job when we last talked. Then I'd been stuck with you.
Wait, what did this have to do with Fellowes? Funny story. Fellowes is in a peculiar social position. He's not titled by birth, but is still part of the nobility, which includes either peers or landed gentry.
This is such a minefield, isn't it? I mean, I come from a class which used to be called the gentry, which is nowadays mistakenly used to include the nobility, but in fact is not. The gentry was essentially the untitled land-owning class. There are these books, Burke's Peerage and Burke's Landed Gentry, and I figure in the second.
He never liked not being part of the peerage side, hence lacking a title. In every piece of fiction he wrote, from Gosford Park to Vanity Fair, even to his perplexing novel Snob, the way that he tenses and stretches his fingers trying to touch and be part of the nobility, it really shows. See what I mean by saying his cousin? He claims he wasn't a looker of any interest to the London high-class debutantes, hence why he was past 40 when he met his wife. But what an acute eye he had to wait until he meets the niece of an hereditary peer, a titled peer he so wishes he was himself. And suddenly, he decides she's worth stalking.
There had been girls I was mad about, but when I looked at Emma, I knew that my wife had shown up. It is the only time I've had a sort of mystical feeling. I actually proposed to her 20 minutes later, and she wrote in her diary, "A funny little man asked me to marry him." Emma wasn't even what he thought of as his type. He normally went for small blondes, whereas she is a 6-foot brunette. No doubt the fact that she was an earl's niece and descendant of Kitchener of Cartome added to her appeal.
As soon as he's legally entitled, he changed his surname to Kitchener Fellows. If he can't have a title of his own, he'll go for the next best thing, a double-barreled surname which links him to the Earl of Kitchener. On the surface, he's also a great supporter of queer and women rights. I really hope he hears this and wonders where has he gone wrong for me to say that. Here's the funny thing about that. In order to get that title, he was ready to do pretty much anything. To hell with the values that make him a lifelong conservative. In the hope to get his wife to inherit the peerage of the Earldom of Kitchener, he supported the daughter's rights, a campaign dedicated to end male precedence in peerage inheritance before it was even established. That's because male primogeniture was what prevented his wife to inherit the peerage and title of Countess of Kitchener in her own right, since most peerages are inherited only by the male line, in lack of which they go extinct. Better lose it than have a girl have it.
I don't see why it shouldn't go to Emma, because she's a perfectly competent person, and if she was a boy, she would be the next Earl. I find it incredible that in 2004 a person is excluded from a privilege solely and absolutely by virtue of her sex.
When he realized that was likely not going to happen in his lifetime, he showed peculiar interest in the rights of trans people to self-ID. He didn't actually, but it's basically what I must have considered for a very long minute when he was asked this by a journalist. What about if Emma changed sex? And he answers equally seriously.
I don't know if that would make her eligible, and would I have to change sex too?
I must say I find it quite difficult to picture Julian Fellows as the Countess Kitchener of Cartome. But if anyone could carry it off with aplomb, I'm sure he could. The Earldom of Kitchener did go extinct, but Julian got his way, bless him. After years of writing propaganda to elevate the nobles of Britain, they finally welcomed him into their ranks, albeit with a life peerage rather than hereditary.
The Queen has been pleased by letters patent under the Great Seal of the Realm dated in the forenoon of the 12th of January 2011 to confer the dignity of a barony of the United Kingdom for life upon Julian Alexander Fellowes, Esquire, by the name, style and title of Baron Fellowes of West Stafford in the county of Dorset.
Well done, Baron Fellows of West Stafford. Years of kissing the ground beneath their feet finally served you well. They invited you in. Unlike OBEs, life peerages are given without explanations as to why. One of the most recent scandals in Britain was actually the fact that a few different investigations found that All it took for a Tory donor to be given a life peerage was to donate over £3 million to the Conservative Party. The one thing life peers have over hereditary is that they sit by default into the House of Lords. It used to be that all peers did, but with over 800 life peerages alone, under Labour in the 90s, we grew a tiny bit of a backbone against nobility by birth and decided that maybe, just maybe, they didn't need to also sit officially in Parliament. I mean, they have their own ways and connection to affect the country anyways, so. You better pay attention to this, because I lost vision doing the research, double-checking it, sourcing books that I don't even feel like I should be endorsing, and this is all just to make sure that I gave you the proper information. And then I decided if you wanted a quick course on British peerage law and history, you'd be doing a bachelor's degree. You would go through the entire book rather than just the citations. So let's get to the skinny of how, to this day, in the United Kingdom, people are not equal. Some are just better than others by simple birth. Not by earning it, just by entitlement. One of the best condensed quotes that I heard that made me want to look into how we decided that some babies were worth living, quite literally in Downton Abbey, with a few million other babies live in poverty. Well, that quote was this one by James O'Brien. While discussing the reasons we have a monarchy when the ones that are on top, supposedly the best of us, turn out like Prince Andrew.
William the Conqueror came to England in 1066, hoping to enrich himself. 1,000 years later, more than 1,000 years later, the Duke of Westminster, when asked for advice on becoming super wealthy, suggested that the best thing you could do was to have an ancestor who was friends with William the Conqueror.
William, what the heck did you do? Turns out before William came to Britain in 1066, there were a few counts and barons, but those were administrative office rather than just titles and associated wealth that we know of today. But William comes, and indeed he comes to have a kingdom and the wealth related to it. He commissions the Domesday Book, which does the job of listing all the land, cattle, people in charge of them, so that he can get crown taxes from them, because in feudalism style, all the land is the king's. At best, you're given the privilege of working it for him. William comes from France. It's called the Norman Conquest, right? Along with him, he brings people he can trust to put in key holder places. That's around the time that Count becomes Earl, as merged by William. He bestows hereditary peerages to his friends to keep an eye on the land for him, and along with him, brings the Norman tradition of male primogeniture to the inheritance of peerages. Skipping exceptions, let's just say a peerage gives you land and a title that is passed through the male heirs that need to be of the body, so no adoptions. And they need to be legitimate, so born as their parents are married. Girls don't matter. Like, seriously, they must hope to either marry well with someone titled and wealthy on their own, or that their mother had some money not entangled in the family estate. And that is actually what we see in Downton Abbey, isn't it? Poor Lady Mary, cheated out of her primogeniture right just because she's a girl, so that all the family patrimony, sealed in the fee tale, has to go to an unknown male descendant. I mean, misogyny is a huge issue at the core of nobility, which is worth discussing, but so is the fact that it doesn't even hide its proto-capitalist tendency derived from pure and simple feudalism.
But to lose Cora's fortune...
Really, Mamma, you know as well as I do that Cora's fortune is not Cora's fortune anymore. Thanks to Papa, it is now part of the estate. and the estate is entailed to my heir. That is it. That is all of it.
Fee tail was established during feudal times by landed gentry to attempt to ensure that the high social standing of the family, as represented by a single patriarch, continued indefinitely. By keeping his estate intact in the hands of one heir alone, in an ideally indefinite and preordained chain of succession, his own wealth, power, and family honor would not be dissipated amongst several male lines, where a formerly great landowning family could be reduced in a few generations to a series of smallholders or peasant farmers.
Peasants. We wouldn't want that. Not for the sake of our great-grandchildren peasants, of course, but for the prestige of our name that would be tattered.
In England, primogeniture provided that an estate would be inherited entirely by the firstborn legitimate son of a nobleman, and that accordingly, subsequent sons were born as mere gentlemen and commoners. Without the support of wealth, these younger sons might quickly descend into obscurity and often did. On this eldest son was concentrated the honor of the family, and to him alone was granted all of its wealth to support his role in that regard by the processes of the fee tail. It therefore approaches the true corporation, which is a legal body or person which does not die and continues in existence and can hold wealth indefinitely.
When you start to consider the real-life context of the drama of Downton Abbey Season 1, all the issues of the entail, you can see how the problems of the Crawley family are quite literally the definition of first world problems. Well, upper class first world problems. Back to our boy William, the source of all our current issues with social disparity in Britain. In the years after him, the kings expanded the peerage titles, so that as April 2022, there are 809 hereditary peers, 30 dukes, including the 6 royal dukes, 34 marquises, 191 earls, 111 viscounts, and 443 barons.
During the reign of Henry VIII, peers attempted to consolidate and secure their position. They declared themselves ennobled in blood and suggested that no peerage could be extinguished except by an Act of Parliament, upon the extinction of all heirs to it, or upon forfeiture for treason or felony.
It makes sense, right? In the Netflix TV series The Crown, looking at the current royal family in a very sympathetic way, there is a scene literally about the anointing of the Queen, where the camera cuts away because that's God's business. It is peculiar because throughout the series they dance around the idea that the Queen knows she's not in contact or in actual representation of God. But according to the Church of England, and thanks to Henry VIII and his inability to stay married to the same woman, she is God on earth. It seems a natural evolution of this idea of divinity on earth that the ennoblement of blood for aristocracy came from. They are, after all, given their titles and chosen by the monarch, God on earth. Much more ephemeral than wealth, but possibly even more effective, the idea of the divine right has allowed a group of people to genuinely sell themselves as above those who are not noble of birth. And that idea of being divinely touched has extended and translated into the belief that they are simply better people all around, more naturally inclined to rule and manage, with an education from birth dedicated to things that the commoners shouldn't concern their pretty heads with.
I watched one episode of the new series of The Crown. I caught myself getting interested in it. I reminded myself that we're essentially glamorizing people whose entire achievement in life was an accident of birth. That's why.
There's a lecture that was done at the Gresham College in the 80s about the British monarchy. But let's be honest, the aristocracy is an extension of that. Remember the nobles around Henry VIII who wanted to make sure that their value was divine blood as well, so unquestionable? I think it's fair to agree the monarchy as the fount of all honors and the one who bestowed titles is by nature entrenched and usually married into the aristocracy for the purpose of this video. Back to the lecture given at the Gresham College by Lord Blake in 1984. That states,
The argument for hereditary monarchy is first that it will normally be regarded as non-political.
there's more, but let's focus on this for the moment. You know what side of the political spectrum exists to support supposedly old values? The right. Conservatism. Lord Blake himself was made a life peer by supporting the Conservative Party. The monarch has to not declare their political sympathies. It's preposterous, though, to think that they have none if they care about their own self-preservation, which anyone in a privileged position does. In 1999, Labour wanted to finally get rid of the House of Lords. With all those riches they control our interest enough without being directly involved in the democratic process more than their money already allows them to, no? Well, that was Tony Blair's new Labour, so neoliberal that he was, he compromised, reducing the number of hereditary peers who could sit in Parliament to 92. When that happened, there was a bit of a scene. The son of a peer, not even a peer himself yet, probably feeling like reducing the number of peers in the House of Lords before he could even be part of it was a personal attack, genuinely thought that making a scene would have been a good idea.
Third reading of the House of Lords Bill, the Baroness J. of Paddington.
This bill drafted in Brussels is...
I'm sure part of being apolitical was standing as a candidate for the Democratic Party immediately after this drama. Do not be confused. The Democratic Party was actually a far-right party in the 90s. His campaign manager said of the situation that
Lord Burford feels very strongly as a true patriot that the Conservative Party has failed completely to stop the revolutionary march of socialism in the last few months.
in 2016, he was still attending dinners of the ultra-conservative Traditional Britain group. Of that, more than his entitlement, I question and I'm curious about the reasons and intentions of common people part of the Traditional Britain group, who would indeed espouse the ideal of he's born higher than us, I want and demand his foot on my neck. I mean, I respect everyone's kink as long as between consenting adults, which is kind of why ultra-conservative views bug me. It's as if someone wanted to impose their kink on me and hey,
my panda, my choice, Mom.
Conservatives do lap up at the same fountains, be on this or the other side of the pond. An article in the Washington Post actually used Downton Abbey as inspiration for true conservative values, at the time in opposition with the vulgarity of Trump.
For a more civilized vision of conservatism, I turn to a well-known font of political philosophy. I refer, of course, to Downton Abbey. It is also a powerful, if implicit, rebuke of the snarling conservatism that has become dominant. The Crawleys are wary of change, but also resigned to it, determined to adapt to the modern world while trying to preserve their way of life. The series suggests that strong institutions and hallowed traditions are important, but need to change with the times, that the rich and powerful have a right to their wealth, but also a duty to help the less fortunate, and that good manners are the glue that holds society together. It's a humane, instinctual conservatism.
Ah, the humane conservatism of being born rich and granting the privilege to others to be their servants in exchange for money, because no one wants to die of homelessness or hunger, especially at a time where it was very much a possibility. Back to that lecture on monarchy, the same feeling was expressed.
The second argument for hereditary monarchy is perhaps more important. Hereditary monarchy means that the change of head of state is made by a process that is one of prescriptive, immediate, and automatic succession. It is all easier under a hereditary system because people are brought up in it. Even if they're not in the direct line, they are bound to have, to some degree, the feel of the job, and are often involved in ancillary duties.
That means that they know how to rule. They are taught how to rule, and the best we can hope for is getting close enough to serve God by proximity to them. Looking back again to Downton Abbey, the class system seems to exist only for the benefit of those at the bottom. Yes, really.
The middle-class cousin, Matthew, has to be told off very sternly by Lord Grantham for not letting his valet dress him. This was apparently the equivalent of chopping his balls off. Matthew duly reforms those cufflings, Mosley. Good choice.
The way aristocrats describe themselves and their role is always in a noblesse oblige perspective. The good old fairy tale that they are the magnanimous lord of the land who works constantly towards his duty to take care of his people.
Noblesse oblige is generally used to imply that with wealth, power, and prestige come responsibilities. In ethical discussion, the term is sometimes used to summarize a moral economy wherein privilege must be balanced by duty towards those who lack such privilege or who cannot perform such duty.
Do they believe it? In Downton Abbey, it would seem so, that they believe with all their heart that they are bound by duty, custodians, almost as if they don't notice the lifestyle that comes with it, especially compared to everyone working downstairs for them.
I've given my life to Downton. I was born here and I hope to die here. I claim no career beyond the nurture of this house and the estate. It is my third parent and my fourth child. Do I care about it?
Downton Abbey is shot at Highclere Castle, home of the 8th Earl of Carnarvon. Who said of the show?
I love Downton Abbey. The story of the Earl in particular, Lord Grantham, chimes with my view of long-term stewardship. Julian has portrayed him as the kind boss, but he has long-term sense of vision and continuity of the place. Some of the ideas that worry the fictional character are the same for me and his family.
And why wouldn't he love a show about
extraordinarily wealthy folks in 1912 and their sweetly devoted workers of obedient servants, at all times paid a certain quantity of lip service to the inherent injustice of British aristocratic oligarchy, however not sufficient to make any of the moneyed characters retaliate?
Fellows wanted so much to impress him, he put himself at his service. See? I told you it was Carson the butler, really. How did he serve, you might ask? Much like in Downton Abbey, the estate is, contrary to any economic sense, not going to pay for itself. So the Carnarvons need ITV's money along with the tours they open their house to. So Fellows dutifully obliged by writing Downton with their castle in mind. He tried to sell their mansion for Gosford Park as well before, but alas, not everyone in production lives to please the nobility, and a location closer to London was chosen. Julian Fellows and the old white men supporting aristocracy all believe in the great man theory, that these lords are the reason anything good ever happened because of their highly influential and unique position, which is clearly the reason for their natural attributes, such as superior intellect, heroic courage, extraordinary leadership abilities, or divine inspiration, especially the latter. Remember when James mentioned the Duke of Westminster? Well, when he died in 2016, you'd think conservative journalists were professional mourners.
Because of Grosvenor's wealth and prominence, his death feels like a requiem for the whole aristocracy and for the great political settlement that stabilized Britain and laid the foundations of its brief greatness.
Greatness means the empire, the greatness of slave trade and colonialism. That's what Brian Appleyard is referring to, and his obituary reads like the long-lost love letter of a fanboy to the aristocracy. He truly believed that Gerald Grosvenor was a fine example of what nobility actually means, accepting the cost of his privilege with a heavy burden of social responsibility. I can picture him beating his chest while he screams at the sky, "Why him? Take me instead!" He actually even sneaks in a mention of Downton Abbey himself, with the good old claim that, see, people love to watch that stuff. That means tourism. Aristocracy is good for tourism, and those big estates need the pennies of the peasants. How about we do a Versailles, which brings in more tourism than Buckingham Palace, but sounds royal too. He cites the conservative philosopher Burke and the way, in the face of the French Revolution, the British nobility is instead a natural aristocracy, the only one to hold the necessary attributes too long and demanding for any human aspirant, so it has to be the anointed by God. Brian must feel attacked by reality that in the 21st century, yes, hereditary aristocracy, it's not justified, and we all see it. But it's just because we don't understand what it is to be born to rule. He is so concerned. Where will we find such minds again? The minds.
Certainly when I was at school, the academic studies came very low down on the list of priorities.
Not even academia leaves hope when all they do is worry about identity politics. What is it, Brian? It worries you that with identity politics we get too aware how your noble friends have taken advantage of an entitlement based on fried hair? Sorry, it's godly incense. The claim that aristocracy was there to guard the freedom of the populace is so preposterous, but he just loves to go at it now.
At their best, the aristocratic families did provide independence. Historically, the role of the aristocracy was to stand between the people and the monarch, restraining both. The nobles stood for freedom against the tyranny either of the monarchy or the majority. They damped the forces of excess and of extremism by, in theory, being independent of party or any special interests except, of course, their own.
Let's recap. Brian thinks that because a family that has a lineage that can be traced back to 1066 and has no other merit than having been friends with William the Conqueror, we need them. In his vision, the classes exist in society much like experience exists across generations. So the nobles are, for some reason, I imagine wealth and access, the parents, whereas commoners are the children who cannot possibly understand life. Let the nobles take care of us. Let us be thankful that they do. And if we don't see how they're taking care of us, it's just because of how ungrateful we are. Seriously, this level of homoeroticism would almost be sweet if it wasn't all about sucking each other's inheritances off. Speaking of inheritance, Gerald Grosvenor is gone, so who's in charge now? Business Life profiled the 7th Duke of Westminster, Hugh Grosvenor, listing most of the times during the last 1,000 years when his family managed to accumulate or be given more land, more riches, more spoils. Because their wealth is held across a series of trusts, it's hardly ever touched by inheritance tax, and young Hugh managed to inherit £11 billion. But not to worry, that just makes him the 12th richest person in the UK. The Grosvenor estate, which manages and encompasses all the activities of the Grosvenor family, defines the purpose of their activities to deliver lasting commercial and social benefit, contributing to the economic, social and environmental well-being of the communities we are part of. Where to start? Let's talk about the communities where their developments are and how useful to their social and environmental well-being it is.
The bulk of Grosvenor's vast fortune comes from the luck of being granted some marshy acres on the north bank of the Thames in the 17th century, which went on to become prime real estate in the world's most overheated property market. Today, the family rakes in vast rents from owning 100 acres of Mayfair and 200 acres of Belgravia.
There's currently a few of the residential properties marketed. A lovely house just behind Grosvenor Square for only £65,000 per month. Short let only. So, the benefit of the communities they are part of really is the benefit of themselves, since the rich who own and live in Mayfair and Belgravia are almost monopolistically the Grosvenor estate. Well, fair enough. They have it, they play it, they don't bother us peasants, right?
Grosvenor Farms Limited claimed £637,709 in Common Agricultural Policy farm payments in 2015. In 2014, Grosvenor Farms claimed even more, £913,516.
I know we're talking less than £1 million per year for a group that has almost 100 billion in assets, but that's kind of the point, isn't it? They have all of that, and yet they take subsidies from the government, aka taxpayer money. The Brexiteers were so worried about their taxpayer money going to Brussels, but the 12th richest person in the UK can't get $1 million just because. Also, fun fact, the agriculture subsidies were mainly funded by the European Union, so for the years to come, we directly are going to pay the Grosvenor Estate agricultural subsidy. But it gets better. A substantial amount of these subsidies are given for agri-environment schemes, which Natural England usually has maps for. Well, given the information about the supposed location of these lands by the estate, cross-referencing with the maps published by Natural England should show the environmental stewardship schemes, but nope, nothing, no sign of these lands. So, considering the statements of the Grosvenor estate and their claim to benefit the community, who exactly are they referring to? Do I say it? Shall I say it? Come on, say it with me. The patriarchy. Rarely the world is as literal as in this case. I mean, consider the two older sisters that Hugh Grosvenor leapfrogged over to become the heir of the Dukedom of Westminster. And there is an entire class of men, just like fellows, who love to keep things the way they are and despise progress, exactly because the patriarchy, to survive, needs a lot of old, anachronistic, misogynistic values to be upheld for as long as possible. Male primogeniture being one of the foundations of it. Do you really think fellows would have taken an interest in the daughter's rights if he wasn't benefiting himself directly? If you want to delve into a wild ride, trans rights, developed in the first half of the 1900s, were actually taken away in the late 60s. Oh, Alicia, how did we get to trans rights? You always want to shove your agenda down my throat. But honey, you take it so well. Funny story. You'll find the point for that change in dealing with trans people was indeed to protect male primogeniture. It is part of the Gender Recognition Act of 2004 that still trans people have no right to inheritance beyond their gender assigned at birth. There was a court case in the 60s that went hidden for decades because a trans man, Ewan Forbes, had changed his birth certificate, meaning that he was now part of the male primogeniture line for a baronetcy title, and indeed, he became Sir Ewan Forbes of Craigievar. The story was hardly smooth. There's a wonderful book by Zoe Playden to learn more if you're so inclined. Her work took almost 30 years to bring this case back to light and features most of the relevant events of the 1900s in the history of trans rights. Anyway, even in providing judgment on the Forbes versus Forbes case, a note was added. Lord Hunter, the judge to preside, took 8 months to concede Ewan was a true hermaphrodite in whom male sexual characteristics predominate. But he was also very explicit that anything he said was not in support of trans people, and that his opinion on the case
must not leave a possible loophole for those suffering from sexual aberrations or deviations, such as certain transsexuals, who may have the strongest motives or drives to pass, legally or illegally, from one side of the sexual spectrum to the other, and who, in the event of success in achieving the social sex of their desire, might bring disastrous consequences not only upon themselves, but upon others in the society in which they live.
He referred to the destabilization of male primogeniture and the constitutional crisis that might be precipitated if succession to aristocratic or royal titles was no longer certain. The penis must rule. Really, to this day, regardless of gender identity, the penis haver inherits. Wait until they find out about the real anatomy of the clitoris. So, in answer to Julian Fellowes' intrigue for the idea of his wife's changing sex just to inherit the earldom of Kitchener, no can do, Julian. The aristocrats you love so much decided that your wife's is only good for your use and consume. In fact, it is a feature, not a bug, of male primogeniture, the reduction of women to insignificant objects of circulation between men, where their value is limited to produce male heirs. Zoe Playden notices how, at once, male primogeniture is not only misogynistic, but also homophobic and eugenicist, because it perpetrates the idea of aristogenesis, where the best and brightest man will inevitably produce more of the same.
Politically, it's a very particular version of what Judith Butler terms homosociality, a network of male relationships designed specifically to exclude women from power and influence, forcing sisters and daughters to live as acknowledged inferiors.
When you look at Downton considering these factors, you start to see the issues with the propaganda it pushes.
Portraying a fantasy world of well-meaning aristocrats served by cheerfully subservient domestics displaying the feudal spirit. Apparently, people like it because it is a throwback to a time when people knew their place, and uppity women and minorities were kept firmly in theirs. Not only has Downton encouraged people to like the Queen and to view the aristocracy with affection, but it has contributed to the miasma of snobbery, nostalgia, and brutality that led to the Brexit vote.
We have to be proud of our country and our long-standing commitment to freedom and democracy. Now is the time to end the culture of self-doubt, the constant self-questioning and introspection, the ludicrous debates about languages, statues, and pronouns. Our history, warts and all, is what makes us what we are today. We live in a great country, a great democracy, and we should be proud of it.
This is Liz Truss, currently the Minister for Women and Equalities. This was part of her speech at the Conservatives' conference. The status quo loves itself, and there are days I watch the debates in Parliament and wonder how can any woman sitting on the right accept that she's supporting a status quo of values that will always give them, at best, the highest office under the lowest of their men, who will always come before her. People like Liz Truss and Priti Patel have gone through the doors of opportunities kept open by women and feminists before them. And instead of continuing to support the future generations, they decided it was better to just shut the door behind their backs, in case it gets too crowded and some other woman might be better than me. I got mine, fuck the rest. Part of that status quo is indeed the nobility. In her speech, Liz Truss doesn't even try to hide the pride she thinks we should have for the great country we are because of our history. Not in spite, but because of slave traders like Colston, who made his fortune trading human beings. And despite being just part of the landed gentry, 300 years later, you find his name still plastered all around Bristol. His is the statue that started the ludicrous debate and that now gave statues more protection than women walking down the street. The Minister for Women, everyone. Doesn't she deserve an applause?
It was when that statue that was pulled down, it was then that I framed a question. And as with all questions about decency and equality, it is built upon empathy. And the way I managed to achieve empathy was by simply imagining walking down a road or walking past a statue that honoured the memory of a man who had enslaved my ancestors. And the way that I managed to achieve empathy was to imagine having to explain to my daughter or my son why I lived in a country that honoured the people that enslaved my ancestors, that sold them like chattels and goods. And I couldn't do it.
A recent YouGov poll indicated that almost a third of Brits thought the empire was something to be proud of. Only 19% felt ashamed. Monarchism is quite alive and well in Britain. British people take a bizarre pride in the monarchy, in the empire, and when you make them notice the aristocracy is there to mock the condition of their birth, they have a weird gut reaction and just go like...
The aristocracy is what enabled Britain to conquer the world. If anything, a shift back to the aristocracy may save England yet.
Inheriting is the easy part. Holding on to it and growing it to keep ahead of inflation and taxes, etc. It's a job. Many heirs have failed. Yeah, life is unfair and cruel. You're telling me that you would want your children to grow up impoverished? Don't get upset because his family put in the work to make sure their descendants were taken care of for generations.
Much like in Downton Abbey, when after the war these big estates have to pay taxes and show to be profitable, the character of Charles Blake's dares put the nobles in their place.
Mr. Lloyd George is more concerned with feeding the population than rescuing the aristocracy. That doesn't seem mean-spirited to me.
In that moment, you find yourself thinking, good Lord, why is the Lloyd George government harassing these poor people? What is this man's problem? Why can't the aristocracy be left unmolested to steward these great monuments of England throughout the 20th century? Give them a subsidy, for God's sake. It's national heritage. If a line like that can make us working class sympathetic of the wealthy lord of Downton Abbey, it's not absurd to understand why the Conservative Party can manage to let poverty rise, take money away from disabled and children, take quite literally food from the table of those living under the threshold of poverty, and still having won 3 elections in a row. More than 22% of the entire British population live in some degree of poverty. Yet, we're in our 12th year of Tory government and their austerity. In 2009, 41,000 food parcels were given by food banks. In 2021, it was over 2.5 million. This is the reality of Great Britain, yet the concept of great, for some vocal old white men, is just about being fanatically obsessed with the concept of history, without knowing what that history actually is. No wonder they love statues so much. All a statue tells you is that someone used to be rich and powerful. And in the UK, those statues mostly depict white men. Gavia Baker Whitelaw wrote a very apt piece in 2020 explaining and listing the reasons why British historical dramas are whitewashed propaganda. And as you can guess, Downton Abbey is exactly the epitome of that. It's not by chance that, rewatching it, I felt the need and interest to look closer and highlight the narratives we're fed in the name of something that not only shouldn't exist anymore, but that, much like trickle-down economics, was never there to benefit most of us and exists only to pacify us. Gavia has one excellent point after the other. Why don't you see the British imperial equivalents of Chernobyl or Watchmen? Because Britain is in denial about its part in atrocity like Boer concentration camps and the Opium Wars. The historical dramas often touch upon class divides because British people are obsessed with class. But these stories just offer a sympathetic eye to the aristocrats who got rich through the slave trade and stolen land. But we don't talk about that. Let's instead talk about the glamour and the costumes and the manners and the houses. And to add insult to injury, shows like Downton Abbey aren't just trying to elevate white rich men of the past, but continue to perpetrate the innate white supremacist value when it shows no hint of race-blind casting, which is far from a neutral choice in the name of historical accuracy. Bridgerton should have at least made you think about that. Historical dramas are a key source of employment for white British actors, and regardless of what conservatives say, they know representation matters. That's why they put Lord Grantham in front of us as a sympathetic figure who's just trying to do his best and his duty for his people, ignoring the bad choices and losses any other man with less titles would have paid the consequences for. Make a show representing rich white men and you will need more white rich men to be their faces. It's not by chance that in the arts sector, the most successful have a lot in common with the aristocrats they play on screen.
Eddie Redmayne attended Eton with Prince William. Tom Hiddleston and Damian Lewis also went to Eton and are descended from lords and baronets. Benedict Cumberbatch comes from a family of wealthy slave owners. When embarking on his acting career, Cumberbatch's mother advised him to change his surname, or they'll be after you for money. She was referring to reparations. Stacey Cumberbatch, New York City Commissioner, is the granddaughter of Caribbean immigrants. Benedict Cumberbatch's fifth great-grandfather owned a plantation in Barbados, and it was common for slaves to take the surnames of their owners during that time. The British Cumberbatches were a famous family of merchants and adventurers in the 18th and 19th century, and it is a matter of public record that Abraham Cumberbatch, Benedict's fifth great-grandfather, founded the family's fortunes on a sugar plantation in Barbados. Thandie Newton, a black British actress, said she had to move to America to get decent roles. "I can't work because I can't do Downton Abbey," she explained. "Can't be in Victoria, can't be in Call the Midwife. Well, I could, but I don't want to play someone who's being racially abused."
The system feeds into itself, elevating white people both on screen and in reality, erasing people of color and maintaining a glossy, flattering view of the British Empire. It's easy to see why Britons have such a myopic opinion of their own history and the very real impact it has on politics today. So, after this wild ride of indecency and injustice, here's a revolutionary idea. Take Downton and all its estate, sell every last bit, and share it all equally between the people who live in it. Sure, including the Crawley family. Yes, the family won't have cars or means to have dozens of servants, but I guarantee that the lives of everyone else who's currently serving or working for the family, from maids to farmers, will be better off and with a better chance at a better life, able to have their own tiny bit of land, their own tools, and able to make a living for themselves better than what selling their labor without ever earning more than food and shelter, stuck in a cycle that gives them just enough to survive, but indeed never enough so they can get ideas above their station. It might seem a bit extreme, but hey, Fellows started it using a puppet representation of what he thinks socialism is in the character of Tom, and plays around with him following his own credo.
He couldn't be clearer. The character Tom abandons his socialist views and bows his head to the king and queen, having saved the head of state from a would-be assassin. Later, the king thanks him for persuading his daughter, Princess Mary, to stay in a loveless marriage with an emotionally abusive man who seems to hate his own children because that's her royal duty. Downton Abbey is subliminal messaging to the extreme. Shut up and do what you're told, Fellows seems to say of anyone who kicks off about the status quo.
You'd think I'm digressing, but in reality, this is an actual point of study here in the UK. Looking at the way wealth is accumulated across generations showed how much as we are one of the richest countries in the world, we also have one of the highest levels of social disparity in the world.
Attempts to improve social mobility in Britain throughout the last 150 years have failed to make any material difference. A study has shed new light on how wealth has been handed down since 1850. The two economists behind the study explain, "To those who have, more is given." The correlation between parents' earnings and those of their children was higher in Britain than anywhere in the developed world. The transfer of wealth between the generations carries additional benefits. Not only are the descendants of those who were wealthy in 1850 still wealthy, but they have longer lifespans than average, are more likely to attend Oxford or Cambridge, live in expensive neighborhoods, and go on to become doctors or lawyers. What your great-great-grandfather was doing is still predictive of what you are doing now. Despite the introduction of wealth taxes early in the 20th century, the arrival of mass education, and the opening of universities and professions to a modern meritocracy, social mobility rates have not changed one iota.
In 2011, Arts Emergency was founded because it was already apparent that the arts are becoming a precluded domain of the middle and upper class. In particular, there is a general acceptance of the fact that unpaid work is a necessary part of getting the foot in the door, which automatically precludes chances to anyone who doesn't have enough economical support to afford to work for free for an undetermined amount of time, regardless of interest, skills, or talent. If you're a creative person from a working class background, you need to do something about your pesky habit to pay rent and buy food. Just get a rich daddy who can give you a house and an allowance, and there you have it. You can study acting all you want.
We are a social justice, not social mobility organization. Arts Emergency is no substitute for justice withheld.
Social inequality is rampant. 14 million people live in poverty, meaning that they earn less than 60% of the median income. Of these, 11 million live in absolute poverty in a modern, civilized, first world country like the UK. On the other hand, more than a third of British land is in the hands of aristocrats and traditional landed gentry. Seems like a diversion? Not quite. The reaction of the British population to Megxit is a very obvious example of how we've been conditioned to look at noble entitlement and uphold it for them. I considered going very much in depth in this chapter because I'm biased, okay? I didn't marry into nobility, but as a mixed race girl from the 80s, I sympathize a lot. I will say this though. The harassment that Meghan has received from the press and the public, it's impossible to districate from the fact that she's not British, let alone white. The decision Harry took to leave the highest authority in terms of entitlement by birth shook the idea of aspiration and duty, and we've been fed that for centuries. If Harry says that treatment they got is not worth the good stuff of being royals, then the question of us peasants facilitating their lives seems obvious. Why do we let them have the good stuff? We are told that them living that lifestyle is in service of us. We believe that they are better than us as God-given rights. If that isn't benefiting them and a commoner can be taken in, then why do we let it? Meghan challenges the immutability of a God-given right. I could go on, but R.S. Locke did better than anyone ever could in analyzing this situation, and I urge you to go check their essay on the subject. When I heard about it on LBC, its clarity and simplicity made the issue painfully obvious. Much like Obama being president pissed off all the white people who had been told forever that they will be always, by default, better than any person of color, so Meghan's marrying into the highest structure pissed off a lot of people who think themselves better than the rest because of the empire, the culture, the whiteness. A royal, half-black American? The insult! Seriously, go read R.S. Locke's essay. It's a quick read and fundamental to understand what really happened here. In the United Kingdom, 92 seats in the House of Lords continue for now to be reserved to holders of hereditary aristocratic titles. Only 2 of these 92 seats were occupied by women until 2020. Now there's 0. The way in which their titles are inherited affects the gender balance in misogynistic ways, and again, that is by design. To change or abolish the aristocracy, we'd need a law, proposed in the House of Commons, ratified in the House of Lords, and enacted by the government. You see the conflict there? These are the people we'd take the power and wealth away from. Besides the presence of nobility in every one of these steps, it's easy to see how the good old concept of bribe can be applied. When someone of quite immense wealth sees their right actually questioned and possibly revoked, what can they possibly do? Go directly to the people involved in this decision process, key holders, quite literally, and make them the infamous offer they can't refuse. Why bother lobbying? Why bother changing the law of the country for generations to come when I can make you rich now, you and your family, and maybe actually kinda guarantee that you gain benefit too from this serial accumulation of wealth via generations? In theory, it's in everyone's interest to break the chain, but in practice, because individuals will be involved and subject to the offer of betterment of their lives if they just let the nobles live their life still for a bit, you can see that we do have a problem.
If I got promoted, I could swing it.
Yeah, but do you really want that?
A bedroom bigger than my torso? Yes, sign me up.
Yeah, well, the higher up you go at Horizon, the sketchier shit they'll ask you to do.
Huh? What did I tell you? Looky, looky.
Oh my God.
You like it here, Lishi?
Yeah, it is nice. But I make $38,000 at both Horizon.
Let me share a little piece of info with you, Lishi. You're promoted again. VP, baby, VP life. You're gonna make $100 grand a year, and that's just for starters. Next year you should make.
Wait, did you say 100,000?
New foods, new friends, new world. You ready?
You have a second?
What's up?
I thought about it, and I want to choose the apartment. New worlds, new street, new foods.
You know what this means, right? Leashy's on Horizon's golden leash.
Leashy's on the leash.
Is it by chance how fascinatedly we watch and look up to modern-day nobility by reason of their wealth and their lifestyle? What do we think it means? Nowadays, besides propaganda, we also have the cult of celebrity. We have images of luxury and extravagance shown in our face to dangle the carrot on the stick, saying, see, you could live this lifestyle too, if you just practice enough, if you're talented enough, if you're pretty enough. The Kardashians, the Real Housewives, the walk-in wardrobes with labels and other status symbols that exist to emphasize their life is good because, in comparison, mine is less. But maybe my life could be more. If I just keep supporting the system, maybe, just maybe, that could be me up there in blinding lights and glistening jewels.
There have to be winners and losers in life. If Yang didn't exist, how would I know how good my life is?
Isn't it fascinating to see how many dress changes they have in Bridgerton? Aren't the labels part of why we watched Inventing Anna and the fascination towards one of us almost managing to fool them by the authority of dressing, behaving, and presenting as wealthy? We watch Emily in Paris and Killing Eve, and a top reason for that are the labels and fashion. These might make it look like envy. But despite what better people than me have expressed in regard to this idea, I believe it to be short-sighted. We might watch Downton Abbey and want to visit the castle it's shot in, bringing money to fellow aristocratic friends to take a selfie where Lady Mary usually is, but that's a weekend. The reason why the aristocracy has been going on for centuries is the way common people have been sold the idea that being in a lower rank in support of this class, but not part of it, is their place, their function in the world. And they should keep in their place because that has a recognized function in supporting those who clearly can do better for the world than them. It's in their blood, chosen by God. That's why it's dukes and earls, and that's why you work in a shop or make videos on YouTube, Alicia. Talking, supporting, paying your taxes to subsidize their lifestyle is how you can hope to fit your place in history. Don't get too many ideas in that head of yours. Don't get above your station. But to accept and support people with a higher status for apparently no reason, we need to romanticize our suffering. Just like anyone working downstairs at Downton Abbey, anyone at all actually in the show, considers working for the family the highest honor possible. Because of the idea that by serving them directly, we are in some way part of God's plan who put them to rule us. And rather than just being ruled, the servants can feel as if they are part of that ephemeral divine right. To be grateful to be in the shadow of the upper class, lest the glaring sun blind you of what's actually possible. I remember being told envy never knows the whole story. And if envy is the idea of, if I can't have it, no one should, what I am talking about here is just really, no one should. No billionaire has worked hard for these billions. At that level, the only way for an individual to accumulate that magnitude of wealth is to have gained from exploitation. I don't want to be like them. I don't want to exploit others for my benefit. I want the exploitation to stop so everyone's life get a little bit better and a little bit easier. To not have to choose between bills and food. To not have to worry about accepting 60-hour work weeks or face homelessness. I'm privileged. I would have to be to even conceive the idea of working on YouTube. I just want everyone else to have that freedom too. I can see the use of Lord Grantham to just deal with the consequences of his bad investments. Downtown sold, and then if only the resulting money from it was distributed equally amongst the people who have worked on the estate, paid taxes, lived in the shadow of the chosen by God, then no one would live in the Abbey. But everyone would be better off than they were, when their existence was just all about being grateful to serve the Lord.